Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain speaking. Welcome aboard the Financial Independence Podcast.
G'day, and welcome to another episode of Captain Fi, the Financial Independence Podcast, where I open the cockpit to some of the best and brightest in personal finance, as well as those who have reached or are on their way to financial independence. Before we get started, remember, nothing said here is financial advice, and you should always do your own independent research before making any financial choices. With that being said, I hope you enjoy the episode and learn something new. This podcast is brought to you by the best portfolio tracking tool for Aussie investors. ShareSite makes it incredibly simple to track your portfolio with automatic updates of share purchases and dividends, easy-to-read graphs, and comprehensive tax and performance reporting, all wrapped up in an easy-to-use cloud-based system. For users with fewer than 10 holdings, it is completely free, and I even used the free version for years. Head over to captainfi.com/ShareSite-review to see if ShareSite is for you. Captain Fi listeners can score themselves 4 months of ShareSite Premium for free by using the bonus sign-up code in the article. If you do ever decide to hold more than 10 stocks, be sure to use this code to get your first 4 months for free. Even if you do only plan to use the free version, using the code means if you ever do upgrade, you will still get your 4 months for free. Ditch the Excel spreadsheet and complete your tax with a click of a button by signing up today. That's captainfi.com/ShareSite-review for your 4 free months. G'day, welcome on board another episode of the Captain Fi Financial Independence Podcast. On board today is Mr. Nomad Numbers. The couple behind Nomad Numbers met in California. Mr. Nomad Numbers was a software engineer originally from France, and Mrs. Nomad Numbers was living in California. In 2018, they basically sold everything they owned and began slow traveling around the world. They've documented their travels on nomadnumbers.com, where they blog anonymously and share their travel destinations, itineraries, and meticulously document their costs of travel and living. They came to the conclusion that the cost of slow traveling the world can be much cheaper than the cost of going to work every day, and they're able to spend almost 50% less than when they were living in high cost of living areas such as San Francisco. Mr. and Mrs. Nomad Numbers are on a mission to inspire others to look outside of their comfort zone and have the courage to live a life true to themselves, not to others. They love writing about personal finance, minimalism, and their journey to financial independence. So, Mr. Nomad Numbers, welcome to the pod. How are you going?
Doing very good. Thanks for having me.
Oh, pleasure's all mine, mate. Really interesting interview we've got lined up, and slow travel is definitely something that really appeals to me. I just spent a couple of months traveling with my partner around the Philippines and Southeast Asia, and we had a wonderful time. And I know slow travel is definitely one of your passions when you can really soak in the atmosphere. Before we get started though, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and where you're from?
Sure. So I am from France, grew up in the Alps in a lovely small town from a modest family, and then got to enjoy little things in life, camping and having a very simple experience with my parents. And they taught me, that's where they started teaching us the value of money early on, basically just making sure that we could only spend what we end up earning and not starting to spend our money before earning it, which has been an interesting impact on my life later on. And also in terms of hobbies, really like the outdoors. So whether it's like hiking, running, scuba diving, all of that stuff. Also by growing up in France, I had to start learning how to cook. And I'm also very passionate about biohacking.
Awesome. So Mr. Nomad Numbers, we all have different ideas about financial independence and FIRE. There's many different explanations and it means something a little bit different to everyone. So what does financial independence mean to you and your wife?
So that's a good question. I think For me, I don't think I can answer for her, so I'll just answer for myself. But I think for me, the first things I can think of is having that armor, like you can wear on, and that basically lets you take as many risks as you want. So I think since we became FI, then we have been able to start working on various projects, and we didn't have the pressure of having those projects to succeed, at least financially. We could just take as many risks as we want. So that's how we decided to start the blog, or like later on the travel apps or the mobile apps have been building around travel stuff. So being at FI, at least we were just starting those adventures, and then we didn't have the pressure of say, oh, it has been 6 months now, we want to make sure we generate enough revenue because this is how much hour we are spending on those. So I think that's one side of the coin. The other side, I think, is also having a big peace of mind, especially when times are difficult. So because we are financially independent, then we could tap into geo arbitrage. And during COVID, we were basically in Bali when the pandemic hit. And then we had the option to basically choose where to go during the pandemic. So we got kind of lucky, but we decided instead of going back home. So as you said, my wife is in the US, I'm from France. So instead of going back to these places, we decided to go to Taiwan, which I am, in retrospect, some of the best choice we could have made because there was no pandemic during, basically for 2020, 2021, they never had really an issue with the virus. And because we are FI and location independent at this time, we have that, which we felt was pretty amazing, as all of our friends were kind of stuck at home in lockdowns, or some of them were. I know that you are from Australia, and some people in Australia were also separated from each other because of different states and all of that. So we don't have to think about that. So that's, I think, where the peace of mind came through, I think, with being FI. And I think one more thing is also you get the mental space to really start figuring out what you want to do with your life, because now you have time to, you have to think about those topics that most people not really think about until they are really in their, what I will call standard retirement age of 65 or above. So I think, yeah, those will be my answer for that.
I really love that concept, the FI armor, because it really does insulate you against a lot of things in life. Like a lot of the time I remember being very stressed out about work and retraining, simulator checks, worrying about if I'm going to pass them, graduating, getting the next level of license, all that kind of jazz. And I guess when you put your FI armor on, none of that stuff really matters. I mean, if you did choose to work and for whatever reason you were fired, it just doesn't really matter. So I like that. And I love you talk about using it as armor to take risks and travel and be able to start your business. Yeah, it's phenomenal and definitely gives you that peace of mind. On your last book there, you talked about mental space to kind of figure out what to do with your lives. It's interesting. It can be quite confronting, can't it?
Yeah, I think clearly for Mrs. Nomad Numbers, that has been much more of a challenge than for me. I think for me, I felt like once I will have the option to stop working, I think I will know what to do with my life, quote unquote. But for her, it was much more of a challenge. I think it might have been because we have different cultures. She grew up in California, in the US, and I think the value system between the US and France seems to be a bit different. I feel like in France, if you like to rank your value system, you will probably put friends and family first and work second. And I feel like in the US, it's about the opposite. You focus by your work, your identity first, especially in the first 10, 20 years of your careers, and your friends or family are just after that. So for her, it was really important now that she has all of that mind space of, all of that time actually, that she wanted to do something very impactful. And it took us a while to let it go. I think now she's more realizing that at the end it's just being more in the present moment, being lucky to enjoy the life that we have, because you never know how long it will last. But yeah, I think it's once you get that, what I'm calling mental space, that's where you're starting trying to figuring out, okay, what do I do with my life? And for some people, it's really daunting. They don't really know because they've been working for 10, 20, 30, sometimes 40 years. And when they get to traditional retirement age, they cannot even retire because the only thing they know how to do was to work, which is kind of sad in some sense, but yes.
Yeah, I think maybe in Australia, the culture is probably a bit closer to the US there. I mean, it's funny. Most Australians want to display themselves as these sort of happy-go-lucky larrikin, enjoying recreation, outdoorsy type people. But I reckon we probably put a lot of emphasis on our careers as well when it comes to our social standing. And it's almost one of the first things people ask when you meet each other. So, what do you do? And I've been going to a few more of these FIRE meetups, people that are interested in the financial independence community. We've been sort of getting together for coffees or beers or whatever and just making friends, having a chat. And I like to think that even in that sort of cohort, we tend to be quite mindful about these things, but it still comes up as one of the first things. Oh, what do you do? It's almost like people are trying to suss out what's your standing in society and how much respect should I give you kind of thing. Whereas it's refreshing to hear that European perspective where you really do prioritize family and passions first.
Yeah, and I think that's why for me, work was really never a mean to an end. It was just, it's going to sound very odd, but it was like you just need the paycheck. Yeah, when I was like trying to explain in the intro, as I grew up, my parents didn't have a ton of money, so you just go to work and that's pay for your food and all of the extra you can save and you can get yourself something nice. But there was nothing about career. We were never mentioning, oh, I'm going to be like, like a very powerful person or I will start my company, all of that things. It was much more, you go to work, you go to school and you have a good degree, then you go to work, you get a job. And of course, my parents have very basic degrees. We got much better degrees than they had, thanks to the sacrifice they made for us and us being very good students. So our life has been much better. But when I moved to the US and I saw much people were spending on education and how what pressure there was, like, oh, because we are spending like tens of thousands of dollars every quarter on that school, you need to get a doctor degree or a very good pay, or like a lawyer degree, a very good paying job because you just need to pay your debt. So it's very fascinating and very two different approach to societal value, I think.
Yeah, it'd be interesting dynamic. I mean, still, we've got HECS or a higher education loan program help where you can pretty much get a government loan, a government-backed loan for your education here in Australia, and it's just indexed to inflation, so you don't have the crazy student loan industry like in the US, which I was learning about through all the headlines recently, which just sort of blew my mind. But yeah, everyone is encouraged to go and get a degree here. And it's kind of funny because you can actually make a lot more money as a tradesperson in Australia and you can be earning a lot higher income sooner as opposed to going and getting a tertiary qualification and doing those traditionally high-paid roles. But I guess it comes down to what you want to do. And I think for a lot of people, as you mentioned, that work is just a means to an end. They're more than happy to skip a university degree in order to take a sort of a more high-paying role. Having said that, though, we do tend to waste our money quite a lot in Australia. So I don't know what the national savings rate is at the moment, but it's pretty shocking.
I see.
Yeah. But look, getting back on track here. So can you tell us a little bit about your wife and your journey to financial independence?
Yeah. So we've graduated in 2004, started to work for a couple of years in France. And then in 2008, I started moving to the US, where I basically have a 10-year career, and I've met her in 2016. So basically 2 years before we decided to embark on that financial journey. So before I've met her, based on my values, I had to find a place to pay rent. I was in San Francisco, working in the Silicon Valley as a software engineer. So I found a place. The rent was already pretty high. I think it was almost 50% of my paycheck, which is kind of crazy for me since in France, you learn to spend just a third of your savings towards your rent. But anyhow, I found that place and then I was just basically saving. I was not frugal, but I was just not in the need of buying a bunch of stuff in general. So all of the money I had, I was like, saving it and investing some of that through the company. I was working through their ESP program, which is basically an employer preferred share program when you get some of the stock of the company at a discount, I think like 15% discount. So I was like, okay, I'll just take some of my paycheck, got to that, which later on was quite good in terms of accumulating money and accidentally kind of investing into the stock market. But yeah, so that was basically what I was doing before I met her. My goal was to save to buy a house, kind of because everybody was doing it. And house in San Francisco or the Bay Area was like $1, $2, $3 million kind of investment. I mean, 1 million if you're looking for a condo, and if you want a proper house, you're more on the higher end of that scale. So yeah, just savings and love hiking and walking, so I didn't really own a car in the city. So again, very low expense. Then we've met and we both love travel. She actually did spend a few years in Australia before we've met and then came back to the US. And yeah, she was into travel, which was very nice to have met a person of her calibers and with those values, because like I was saying earlier, a lot of people in the US tends to be very career focused. And so that was kind of difficult for me to be with people that spend all of their week and weekends focusing on work versus ensuring everything nature has to offer and all of the wonderful things we have on the planet. So since we're on the same page, we decided to take a year off initially. And I was asking her, because our expectation was like, oh, but taking a year off, you might want to spend, I don't know, like 100,000 to put on the side. So sure, we might be able to do that, but then we would have to come back. And I was telling her, well, if you have that much money, I was pretty sure that we can probably travel to 3 or 4 years. So that's how we kind of stumbled into the financial independence, because as we were doing research about I think we were typing things like, how much does it cost to travel the world for a year? We started running into people that were basically doing it forever. So we were like, oh, how is that possible? So that led us into kind of the mainstream financial independent podcast that we have in the US, such as The Mad Scientist, of course, Mr. Money Mustache, and a few others. So we went through that rabbit hole. So that's kind of my very long answer on how we get to FI. Actually, the journey itself, once we understand about FI, was pretty much done because we were both savers, and so our numbers were already pretty close to what we needed. So on year 2 of our dating life, we decided to basically start selling everything. We said, hey, we've got enough money, let's do that. So sold off our stuff, and I have to leave my job. She was able to get a fully remote job. So for her, she was able to keep it, which was really nice because our cost of living dropped significantly while she was still working. And then, July 1st, 2028, we left and never looked back to that decision.
Wow, that's super exciting to go from, hey, what's this FI thing, to checking your numbers and realizing you're actually there. It must have been a pretty exciting moment.
Yeah, that was a bit, actually, we were like, it's not going to work. I mean, for me, I'm much more number driven. I was like, oh, sure, it will work. And I mean, she's also number driven, but I was like, yeah, the maths checked out, so I'm fine. I think she wanted a bit more of validation. So we did, on that second year, as we were planning for it very seriously, we went to a Chautauqua, which is kind of a week-long seminar where some of those FI bloggers and writers are. So we got to meet Pete. So Mr. Money Mustache was there, Vicky Robbins, the Millennial Revolution guy. So basically like 5 or 6 blogger or podcaster or FI folks were there, and maybe 20 of us, which were people that were either already FI or planning to become FI. So I think that was the validation when we share our numbers. I think Jim Collins as well, we wrote the Simple Path to Wealth, was there, and we share our number with him and what we wanted to do. And he said, yes, you guys are fine, no worries. So then Mrs. Nomad Numbers was like, okay, let's do that.
Yeah, the Chautauqua sounds awesome. I was chatting to JL. We were recording a podcast the other day, and I was asking him about the Chautauqua, and his eyes lit up. He was so passionate about it. It's a shame they're not running anymore, but there is some awesome events that people can get involved in. I think there's like Camp Fire, there's Camp Mustache over in the US. And then here, closer to Australia, I recently spoke to Amy Minkley, who lives in Bali, and she runs FI Freedom Retreats, which is, I guess, kind of like an Australian version. So there's definitely ways. Really so there's ways people can get involved. I'm really looking forward to checking one out soon. So yeah, it's been a lot of fun getting out of the comfort zone and meeting people.
Yeah, there was actually a few Australians that made it all the way, because that retreat you're mentioning was the one that Jim's started in Ecuador. There have been some that have been done in Europe, and I feel like even though the one in Ecuador is kind of, I think Jim seems that he's not going to be leading them, I think there will still be something of that sort. I cannot really share all of the details, but from talking to some of the organizers, I think there should be something coming up.
Yeah, we'll suss it out and have to put links in the show notes if we do find stuff out, because, yeah, it's really exciting. And I think you kind of mentioned it, just by being able to collaborate and share knowledge with each other. And I guess you get that sort of reassurance and that community, feel safe, and you realize, oh, I'm not the only person doing this, and I don't have to learn everything from scratch and reinvent the wheel. It's awesome to be able to lean on people that have sort of been doing this for decades.
And being with your tribe, I think that's what matters, because maybe you had that issue like when you're the only one into this and you talk to most of your coworkers or your friends, they don't understand it. So they think you're crazy. So there is no really support. So no, it's not going to work. What about this? What about that? But once you are surrounding yourself about people that get it, it's so much more powerful. And I think that's what the Chautauqua was really good at. And that's what definitely convinced my wife that say, okay, yeah, we should do that. I will definitely encourage everybody which is as doubt or need a support system to join any of those kind of seminar. It's worth the money you put and it's a great experience.
Yeah, I experienced that as well. I was doing an interview, I was doing the Nomad Numbers interview questionnaire, and that was one of the questions. And yeah, it's not really something that I share with a lot of people, with my close friends and family, because the people that I did share my sort of FIRE aspirations to, they just thought I was nuts. They thought I was crazy, and they just didn't get it. When you and your partner decided to sell all of your stuff and travel, it made it a heck of a lot easier. And I know a lot of us have a lot of crap. I like to consider myself somewhat of a minimalist, but I certainly have a lot of stuff, which I think just goes to show the average Australian has a lot of crap. You talked about minimalism being really important to you and your wife, especially with your goal of travel and slow travel. Could you talk a little bit about, I guess, your take on minimalism and why it's important to you?
Yes, so I think when we discover minimalism, I think it was through The Minimalist who wrote the book, and they have also a very interesting documentary. I think we are both not big spenders, but I think it was bringing this to the next level to try to understand why it's good not to spend just for the sake of spending. So it was definitely important for us from an execution standpoint. In order for us to travel, we cannot just, as you said, you cannot travel with your house. So we really have, by being minimalistic and only carry a few possessions, that really were the one that we loved and we felt were very useful to us. We were able to do it. It is also what we learned from minimalism is that because you go from owning, I don't remember, because I was over the 10 years, I was in San Francisco, I stayed in the same apartment. And over time, I was accumulated probably like 100 t-shirts. As we were working in tech, you always get freebies and stuff. And I was like, sure, fine. But it's okay. I did not even know I have 50 of those stuff because you put them in your closet and then you put one more on top. And so, yeah, there is just so much overhead. So, yeah, you have to think about the time to manage what you are going to put on when you wake up, just the time to take care of that stuff. If you start having cars, if you start having a bunch of stuff in your garage and stuff, like you have to clean and you have. So all of those was increasing overhead that we don't have to think about, to ultimately focus on really what matters to you. Because now when we woke up, we have, I don't know, a dozen kind of apparel we can each have and put on, and that's perfect. That can manage with, we like to travel during the summertime, so that's plenty. Once is needs to be replaced, we get a new one, and that's it. So we feel like we're also saving, so we're saving money because we don't spend on useless stuff. We save time because we don't spend on keeping track of all of that stuff and keeping in good shape and all of that. And we use all of that time instead to focus on experience and our relationship as a couple. So yeah, I think this is what we got from minimalism, and it's so life is so much better now than it was before.
So that really frees up a lot of your bandwidth, I guess, your mental bandwidth and also financial bandwidth to focus on your experiences. Like you just said, you love to slow travel. So can you talk to us a little bit about what slow travel is and how you guys travel the world?
Yeah, so a short definition for us of slow travel would be to be traveling at a slower pace and in a kind of sustainable fashion. So slower pace. So we like to compare slow travel to fast travel. So fast travel, it was the way we used to travel before we did the slow travel. So basically, this might be familiar to you. Oh, I take a week, maybe if I'm lucky, a 2 weeks vacation, and I go to one country and I'm trying to visit everything within that country. And I spend a lot of time on transportation and on like booking like tours and all of stuff. So it's just super tiring. And after 2 weeks, we're like, it's almost like you need a new vacation. So it's basically going the complete opposite direction of that. So to give you an example, we decided at the beginning that every time we are going to a place, we are going to stay at least minimum 4 weeks in one city. And the goal was not to check everything out. The goal was just to live like local. So basically embracing, as someone living there. So of course you will do your own groceries because we personally love to cook. You will do all of the admin stuff. And then, on weekends, though we try to like to do more things on weekdays and weekends because it's everybody do things on weekends. But on weekdays, we'll just go hiking, just check out if there is like tourist attraction, it's fine as long as it's worth doing it. But we won't, for instance, purchase booked experience or book tour when people bring you to all of the touristy stuff. We just decide, and since we have the time, to decide on the experience. So I think by traveling that way, this is bringing much more authenticity into the quality of your travel experience. You also get to meet people, though we felt like now we are more thinking that 1 month is too short and we are looking more to stay much longer period, maybe 3, 4 or more in one location. So you can get really deeper connection because it takes really times to meet people and have a meaningful conversation with them. And then you also reduce your impact into your environment and also into the travel as well, because we wanted to do that for many years. I mean, at the end of the month, we're going to hit 5 years of slow travel. So you cannot really do that. If you do fast travel, you might be able to do it for a year, but it's not sustainable for more than that because it's so taxing on your mental health and your finance, of course.
Yeah,
as well.
I can totally relate to that. I used to fly all over the world for work. I used to be a cargo pilot, and yeah, we would get time off and we would be able to check out some sort of touristy things at a bit of a surface level, but we were almost like, I don't know, kind of hoping that there'd be some maintenance issue, we'd get a delay so we'd be able to actually see something rather than just go out for dinner and min crew rest and then we're off on another leg. So yeah, so I spent a lot of time crisscrossing, and it sort of, for me, it really did turn me off traveling a bit. It felt like a bit of a chore. And so recently when I was able to go and spend a bit of time slow traveling around the Philippines and Southeast Asia, it was a lot of fun, and it really helped. My partner is Filipino, so we were able to really experience the culture aspect, and it was a completely different experience to what I'd had previously for work and previously when I'd fast traveled as well. So yeah, I think it's definitely a growing trend, and it's an awesome achievement that you can now do post-FI. I guess this leads me into my next question, which is, so you guys started slow traveling and then you started talking about it on your blog, Nomad Numbers. So can you tell us a bit about how Nomad Numbers came to be and what do you publish? I mean, are you able to make a living from travel blogging? I mean, how does it work?
So I think back to that mental space conversation we're having, we really wanted the project to spend our time on. And as we stumbled into FI, we realized, we need to share that with people, especially because we were living in the high cost of living in California. And as we started to travel, we realized, oh, wow, you can really travel the world for much less than we used to spend just to manage our rent and just going to the office every day. So that's kind of the essence. It's like, we are going to start our blog. We just document our journey. We are going to show the exact numbers, basically, of all of the places we are visiting, and just show to people that it's pretty true that as you travel and you tap into geo arbitrage, you can really reduce your spending by a lot. So I think that's how the blogs came about. And as we have been blogging since pretty much 2018, we kind of, beside covering all of those destination reports, which basically we just show you what we've done, what we saw, what we ate, and how much it cost, we also share kind of the how, which is all of the techniques that we have. So basically, we use travel reward because we are based in the US and we have all of those credit cards, so we don't pay for our flight, which is reduce our cost significantly. We have ways to get money from ATMs without having to pay fees and blah, blah, blah. So all of those techniques that people can use, or what do we pack in our luggage to slow travel. And also the philosophy as well. So we touch on some of those concepts like minimalism, for instance, but also we explain how we decide to buy something, like what's kind of our mindset or even our morning routines, all of those things, or how we live as a couple by living 24/7 together, all of those things. So that's basically the three main pillars into the blog. And lately we've been adding interviews, and that's why I'm very excited to have you soon on our blog, as you agreed to be on this, when we also wanted to show people that it's not only us, because of course, I work in tech, high cost of living, people can always try to put people in compartment and say, oh, for you it might be easier, blah, blah, blah. But we actually realized that we reach out to so many people, and people have, with different background, different ethnicity, different citizenship, still manage to live a life that they want for themselves, which is basically at the end what the blog is about, just inspiring people through slow travel to show that people, hey, if what you want to do is X, for us is slow travel, you can just do it. Don't ask for permission, or there's so many ways to really focus on what get you excited about. And hopefully we want people to not have regrets in their life and really live a life that they want for themselves. So that's kind of the blog. And in terms of the income part, we are not living out of it for sure. As you probably know, a lot of work, and so we do make some income from it, and I do share the income of the blog. So if people are interested, you can check it out. But it's definitely a small amount of money compared to the amount of passive income we do generate. So we still don't mind it. I think it's good discretionary income, but we unfortunately don't make a living out of it.
We'll get back to the show in a moment, but for now I want to ask you a question. Do you have a side hustle? And if you do, is it scalable? My side hustle is building and running websites, a form of digital real estate. Now, it might sound tricky to make money online, but really, they're just small online businesses that have low overheads, high margins, and which you can easily scale by outsourcing. If you've ever read The 4-Hour Workweek by Tim Ferriss, then you're on the right track. What I love about websites is, just like my investments, they're working 24/7 to make me richer. And I can put as much or as little effort into running them as I like. I can pay a writer to produce a piece of evergreen content, which is then edited and posted by a virtual assistant, and then it can be viewed potentially millions of times and easily updated by my editors over the years to remain relevant. If you want to learn more about this lucrative side hustle and retraining for the digital workforce revolution, then check out my article about making money online, and read my review of the eBusiness Institute and their online self-paced courses. The eBusiness Institute cover everything from total beginners right through to advanced web design and how to buy, renovate, run, and sell websites for profit. As a graduate of the eBusiness Institute, I can't thank Matt and Liz enough for the valuable web skills I've developed, and now I can enjoy growing my portfolio of websites for semi-passive income. Captain Fi listeners can register for free access to some of their resources by following the link in the eBusiness Institute review article on captainfi.com. So, what are you waiting for? Start learning how to build a portfolio of digital real estate and use websites to make money today. Another cool thing that I was checking out on your site is a tool that you've developed, the Nomad Purse. Would you be able to explain a little bit about what the Nomad Purse is and how people can use it for slow travel?
Sure. So as we were tracking our expenses, we started doing it with spreadsheet, like I'm sure most people do. And so as a software engineer, I was kind of frustrated every month for the blog, spending like a couple of days to put all of the finance. So the tool started as more like a tool for us to make it easier. But now it's like basically a travel tool for anyone to use. So basically you go to any country, you want to track your expense. The tools let you do three things. So the first thing, you capture the expense. You will take care of currency conversion and have the right categories to match with the kind of travel lifestyle. And then it gives you analytics. So you can analyze, understand your behaviors. So ultimately, we just want it to be a companion for everybody that want to travel, especially if you travel on a long period of time. So then you really get a pulse on your finance. And especially when you go to different country, the tools will let you project like, oh, you spend 1 month in Chiang Mai, you pay that much. Well, did you know that if you stay 6 months, then you are going to spend, or even a year, it is how much per year are going to spend. So you can then starting seeing at a glance kind of the cost of living around the world of all of the places you've been. And that was for us, we were like, clearly the US is definitely the highest, and everywhere we've been in Europe or in Southeast Asia, it's so much cheaper. And because we use your arbitrage, we went to Australia last year for 3 months. So Australia is definitely much more on the higher end. But if you mix and match with Cambodia or Vietnam or Chiang Mai or even here Taiwan, you can still have a pretty reasonable spending. So again, that's what kind of the insight we use that tool for. So then we get a good pulse about arbitrage and travel.
Yeah, that's awesome. So with the income that you're creating from your investments, would you be able to tell us a little bit about what you personally invest in and why?
Yes. So I think we started with the boring investment plan to FI, which was, we read, as I mentioned, we met Jim Collins that wrote the Simple Path to Wealth book. And that's basically read of us about finance. So we went from owning individual stocks, as I was mentioning, we both had stocks in the company we work for, to moving to low-cost index funds. So I think we started with pretty much most of that being into stocks. I think now we are roughly 60% stocks, so low-cost index, both on the US and the internationals. So I think VXUX and VTI, if I am correct, with Vanguard, which is very specific to the US, just kind of the broker we use. And then the 40% left, it is basically 20% in cash, because we're pretty conservative, other 20% into real estate. We want to kind of diversify. And we are diversifying even across continents. So some of that is in the US, some of that is in France. And we have a tiny bit, maybe 1% of crypto, kind of that edge. And yeah, I think that's kind of our allocation.
So you tend to hold a slightly larger portion of cash than some people in the FIRE community would. Is that just because you want to smooth your cash flow for traveling, or is there any other reason?
So some of that is in taxable and not taxable accounts. So some of that we don't have access until we retire, which I'm sure a listener might just say, why are they like holding into cash? This is more like personal preference. I think Mrs. Nomad Numbers is much more risk averse, and she feels like we're just going to hit a bad recession soon. So she's, I think, holding much more than she should into cash for that respect, expecting the market to really correct severely. I mean, we are seeing that since 2018, so who knows what's going to happen, but I think that's why we have much more. On the taxable account, so the one that we have directly access to, I don't remember the ratio between the two, unfortunately, top of mind, but we definitely want to have some cash if we want to purchase a property or something. We're thinking about having a home base somewhere, most likely in Europe in the next few years. So having cash on the side, I think, will be also used for that.
Yeah, look, I'm kind of doing the same thing myself. I'm hoping to get a hobby farm that I'd love to live on here in the Adelaide Hills. And so that's been my goal for a while. And so I'm, trying to accumulate a bit of cash.
That would be amazing.
It's not cheap though, is it? There's all these expenses with purchasing and it's just par for the course.
Yeah, no, but I mean, the freedom and being in nature and having all of that land. And I mean, I know from reading, because we've been exchanging through that interview, that you are definitely love gardening and love having space around. So I think that will be, I'm sure you will do quite well if you can get that. Yeah, I have no idea about price, unfortunately, but if you can get that, yeah.
Yeah, well, there's a lot of parallels between gardening and finance. If you take the time to, or you make the investment into setting up your garden, you're conditioning your soil, you get a seedling, you look after it, you keep tending it. It's kind of, I guess, like dollar cost averaging in finance. And eventually you get a reward at the end. You get the food. I think it's good. It's really important as well, teaching delayed gratification. So it's a wonderful thing I like to do with any kids or anyone that's wanting to learn about money. So the first step is learning about gardening first, because it's a lot more tangible. But speaking about money, so did you guys have a target FIRE number? And how much do you spend every year?
So we do spend less than 40,000 a year, and that was basically kind of what we had in mind. So I think we were very conservative. I think we are going to spend much more than that. But at the end, I think we started at 30, 35, and I think last year we were at 40,000. We went all crazy. But I think, that's kind of our target. I think traveling around the world, I mean, we stay in Airbnbs, we have kitchens, and because we love cooking and stuff, so we don't definitely have a frugal life. And I think with 40,000, we are pretty happy with what we've got. So we'll probably stay in that range for the foreseeable future. So that was, I think that was the target we had in mind when we were building our portfolio and reaching our target.
Yeah, it's very similar numbers to myself, actually. I think I'm spending around about 36,000, and that included a bit of travel as well. And I think I have a really awesome life. Like, I live this super comfortable life, and it's basically a life of luxury. We're in sort of this top 1% of wealthy people. And this conception, you mentioned it earlier, you were originally planning to spend $100,000. You don't really need to spend that much to have an awesome lifestyle. I think by really just focusing on the things that you love, you can really just cut away all of the unnecessary crap.
Yeah, and I mean, I was looking at the breakdown from last year. I think 40% of our spending it's in accommodation. So then the rest was like really 20% was on food. I mean, that's $7,000, and it's going grocery shopping as well as going out. And then there was like 12% in everyday expense, which is basically data for your phone, going to the gym. We take classes. My wife is learning French. All of those kind of things. And then transportation was 10%, because again, if you do local transportation, and we don't pay for flights, so definitely we probably save 10,000 on top of that, because we have been kind of flying international a few times a year. But yeah, there is no mortgage, there is no car payment, there is no Uber Eats, all of those like services that they basically make you save time, but we don't really need to save our time because we have plenty of time. So yeah, all of those expenses are gone. So it's really hard to think, how can you spend more than 40,000? I mean, sure, you can live in a penthouse and again, have a ton of space that we are not going to use, and you can spend 100,000 if you like. And a lot of people we interview spend way less than that, and they still have a pretty exciting life. I'm sure if we get ourselves based in a reasonable country, we can reduce that further, because then, your accommodation costs will go down even lower because you can get a long-term lease and those kind of things. And yeah, so I think if people can already afford to generate 40,000, which is basically having $1 million in the bank invested into some index funds, I think they can already have a pretty good life. Yeah.
It's funny, isn't it? Those little expenses do add up. I ordered Uber Eats Sundays. Like, it was just me and a few of my friends, 3 of us. We were just doing some renovations to their house and in their garden. And yeah, we were really tired and we were just feeling lazy. So I was like, I'll order it. And it was $30. And when I checked last, I'm pretty sure a Sunday was like $3 or maybe $4. So
Yeah.
there's a huge premium for those services. And we probably shouldn't have had it anyway. It's unhealthy. Anyway, it was a nice little treat. But yeah, I totally with you on there, man. If you're generating 40 grand a year in passive income, that is an awesome lifestyle, especially here in Australia. Yep, housing is expensive, but there are ways to make it work, and especially if you're sharing with a partner, it makes it a heck of a lot easier. And that's the other thing, is that just because you've got this passive income and you've quote unquote retired, it's very unlikely that you're not going to make any extra money. So I guess the next question I was going to ask is, what does early retirement quote unquote look like? But for a lot of people, it means working on passion projects. And a lot of the time that does produce a bit of extra income. So I guess I'll throw the question out to you, mate. So what does quote unquote early retirement look like for you now? I mean, the caveat being, if at all, I mean, is it really early retirement?
Yeah, no, it's always a good question to ask. I'm sure people have different answer to it. I think for us, it's really living the life. It's more, okay, now we don't have to worry about finance. And so all of just going to work and spending all of that time working for someone else. So now we have the freedom to do what we do, like I was mentioning earlier with the fire more and all of that. So for us, it has been a few things. So learn how to live as a couple 24/7. We got married 2 years after we met, so pretty early, but we were still working the first 2 years. So we went from 2 years of working and seeing each other like most people do, a couple of hours every day and more on weekends, to 24/7. So that was be interesting to make those adjustments and having our own space and dealing with that. So far, we managed to do it for 5 years, so I think we should be good. And then it's also figuring out what we want out of life now that we have all of that time. It's basically the questions that the regular retirer, I'm sure, are trying to think about when they reach 65 and they say, okay, so now what do we do? They might have kids, they might be out of the house, now they get to connect together as a couple. So we are still on this. I think on that part, we are thinking more slowing even further, as I was saying, and potentially having a home base to kind of build the community. I think it has been, slow travel has a lot of positive things, but I think community, trying to build a long-term community is kind of a challenge because by definition, you kind of move. You travel, so you kind of move a little bit. So we are thinking much more having like half of the time, 4 to 6 months in one place where we will come back every year. So we will have create a committee around this and then still do the travel for all of the benefits I was mentioning. So I think what the first 5 years was about traveling, exploring a bunch. I think the next 5 years will probably be about slowing down further, finding that base, developing that community. And I think that's so far we thought. I don't know what's going to be the next 5 years. I think we see those are like kind of chapters in our lives. So we'll see.
That's pretty exciting. I love the idea of having chapters or like seasons of your life. And that's the beauty, is you've got the freedom now. You can figure it out. You can take it as it comes. That's been a big thing that I'm trying to focus on.
One more thing I forgot is just because of that, the freedom, you kind of try to experiment. I think initially, on the first year of our journey, I was telling to Mrs. Nomandever, she was in that phase when she had that remote job. She quit it after a few months because she saw that I was having so much fun exploring and she was kind of stuck in our working space, try to work during the day when I was, swimming and doing all of those things during the week. I was telling us, don't try to force too much on you what's going to bring you that life purpose. I think it will come to you through experimenting. So here, for instance, we're in Taiwan. I've been looking into tea a lot because Taiwan grow tea and they're very well known for teas. So going to tea events and all of that stuff. There is like a strong board game community. So you just get to experiment stuff in the local place you are. And yeah, I think through experimentation, something will stick, something will not stick until you find what you like. I think it's so much, I think, of things we like, we don't know of them yet, I feel. So you have just to get out there and try new things. And then when something sticks, then sure, you will know it sticks, and then you will just put your soul and energy into it and make it a business or make it like something you want to dedicate your life for.
Yeah, I think that's awesome advice, man. Thanks for sharing. Because you don't know what you don't know, so it's important to get out there and try stuff. And it's funny, man. Like I'm forcing myself to get out and try new things as well. I tend to be a little bit stuck in my routines.
It is hard. It is really hard, especially for us as a couple, and because we travel, like I say, quite often because every month. Now we're in Taiwan for 6 months, so because we've been here during the pandemic and kind of we have residency here, but last year we were like every month we are moving. So you cannot really, 1 month actually, even though it's a lot of time, you don't really build any friendship during that time because by the time you potentially meet someone, it's already 2 weeks in and then you have to leave. So it's really hard when you travel. I think for you, because you are much more home-based, it might be a bit easier, but yeah, I think you have to put an effort. It's not easy.
The community aspect is a huge part of our mental well-being. And I found that even the fire community has been bloody awesome. I've met a lot of really good friends now through it, but also just little things from home base is like volunteering. So going to the community gardens and working with the shelters with animals. It's a lot of fun. Honestly, everything's kind of a bit of a balance, really. I love the concept of having a home base and maybe traveling 6 months of the year or something like that. But hey, we'll find out what works for us when we get to it. I guess a big thing that I've been shifting my focus to is living in the moment, or trying to be, I guess, a bit more mindful and enjoy the present. Because I definitely spent a lot of time focusing on the future and worrying about things and finances and that. So yeah, it's been a nice opportunity.
But even that for us, so it's a really good point. Even that part for us was something, because through travel we went to Thailand, Chiang Mai. We met with monk because the Buddhism in Thailand is really strong, and they were teaching us meditation. I say, oh yeah, let's do that. It was a free class. We did the first 1 day like introduction things, and we loved it so much that then we went to a silence retreat with them for a couple of days, and that was like definitely centering us, taking a moment to pause. You don't speak. You might have done some of those, but it was like opening ourselves. It was a good example actually of things that we didn't know about, that what was really meditation, because we knew about meditation using those apps, but it's more, they don't really teach you, and it's more like a market. I mean, it works, but you don't really get all of the context and where it came from. So being taught meditation from the Buddhism perspective, which is like where some of that definitely come from, was definitely changing our approach. And so every morning we try to do a bit of kind of mindfulness or meditation before we get into our device and all of that. And yeah, we wouldn't have been to Thailand. I don't think we'd have got that experience, and we'd probably not realize how much it's important to be in the present, meditate, be grateful for the life we have.
Oh, absolutely. Have you heard J.L. Collins' guided meditation for when the stock market is dropping?
Yes. Yeah, that sounds amazing.
Oh, it's so good. I was just chatting to him the other day and I brought it up and I just said, mate, it's awesome.
It's so
I
good.
thought it was a piss take, but it's actually really good.
It's very applicable these days. We retired 5 years ago. We went through COVID, even that recession. We are not done with the recession. Likely things might get worse, but still our portfolio are still much higher than it was in 2018 when we left. And it was already a conservative approach. So we are not really worried that we are going to run out of money. So we see the news, but we don't struggle as much.
Oh, yeah, the news is just crap.
I was able writing on these topics that we don't even check the news. I mean, checking the news in the US or in most countries, super negativity. So you start your day, increase your stress for no reason, make you completely mess up your day. I don't even know what's going on in the US right now, and some people might, think that might be a bad. I mean, I think if something major will happen, we'll learn about it. But I think the day-to-day news is like, there's so much noise and so much crap. I just stop, and I haven't felt any better since then.
I used to have to keep a pretty close eye on, well, definitely local events to destinations that I was flying to, and we would get briefed by work, and yeah, we'd always be keeping an eye out, because sometimes when stuff hits the news, that would result in us having to work. So yeah, we would always try and keep an eye on it, and it certainly has this insidious effect where it does cause a bit of this anxiety, and Yeah, I think media, this particular news headlines and stuff, there's a lot of money to be made in selling doom and gloom. So it's just,
Yeah,
I personally find it a lot easier to just disengage. The low information diet's the way to go for
totally agree.
me. So, look, the next couple of questions I want to ask, people hate them, right? Because they're difficult ones to answer. But I always ask them because I think it's really important that when we meet and listen to successful people that have sort of achieved what we want to achieve by looking at what are they reading, what are they listening to, what are the resources that they're using for education. That's really helpful for us on our financial journey. Now, I know you mentioned J.L. Collins a couple of times, and obviously he's the godfather of personal finance and an awesome author. The Simple Path to Wealth is an awesome book and a great web series. And you mentioned that's been a huge impact for you going to the Chautauqua. It sounds like it was absolutely life-changing for you and your wife. Do you have any other books that you might recommend people read?
So I think health, it's a topic that we are really focused into. So I think the plant paradox might be a good one to start with. It's from Dr. Stephen Gundry. My wife picked up that book initially because she has an autoimmune condition. Long story short, her gut was messed up, and I feel like you're aware of gut health. So she has to revisit everything she was eating to fix that issue because the traditional medicine was telling them. So she was basically starting losing her hair because her autoimmune was super active and starting attacking her own body cells. And the only treatment was steroid injection locally on the skull to kind of reduce the autoimmune response, which was not really fixing the root cause, just fixing the symptoms. So she said no to that, and she went to her own journey. So long short, The Plant Paradox is one of those books that kind of reset what you think you know about food. So this one explained to you that even some of the plants that we think are good for us can be bad because they carry what's called a lectins, kind of a protein, which they use, most of them are on the seeds or on the surface of the skin to protect themselves from animals and predators, not to eat them until they are ready and ripe. So in our modern society, we used to eat those fruits. So some of those are like nightshade, like tomatoes, eggplants, potatoes, and a few others. So it's really interesting to know that even the things that you think are good for you, like plants and vegetables, some of them are definitely not equal to each other. So that's a really good one. And as a follow-up, he has The Longevity Paradox, which is explaining how to live longer and what are kind of good hacks in terms of the food you eat. So those two books together can be interesting as well.
Awesome. Great recommendations. I actually haven't read those, so I'm looking forward to having a read. I know nightshades like tomatoes and eggplant, potato have been an contentious topic. Some people get really sick when they eat them. I've personally haven't had any issues with them, but yeah, I definitely want to read into it and see what the go is.
I think it's those things that they might not kill you. They won't kill you tomorrow, but over a long period of time, they will just inflame your gut. And for me, it's the same. I grew up on eggplants and ratatouille and all of the... Ratatouille is basically a 9-chain bomb. It's tomato, eggplants, zucchini, and all of that stuff combined together. But I've been fine. So again, I'm just aware of it, and I know that we should not eat as much, but I still try to enjoy life as well. But for my wife, definitely, she will get that sickness. So for her, it's at least now she knows why. So that's good.
Yes, super important. Health is obviously a major part of your life. And yeah, there's heaps of really good health related books. Like I found The China Study by Dr. Colin Campbell to be really life changing. And also Michael Pollan has got a number of awesome books. And I know we're going to talk about it when I'm going to do the Nomad interview with you guys, but How to Change Your Mind, when he talks about the use of psychedelics, like that was game changer for me. But also his book In Defense of Food is great. But yeah, I'm going to check out The Plant Paradox as soon as we get off the call. Actually, I'm going to have a look at the library and rent one. I got to force myself to rent books because I tend to buy them and I know it's a bit wasteful. So are you a podcast guy? Do you enjoy listening to podcasts?
Yeah, I really like podcasts because I can consume them easily, especially when I'm on biking or doing all of that. So recommendation on those. So Tom Bilyeu, which is the guy that founded that cereals bar company called Quest and become billionaire out of it, starting a podcast. His podcasts are mostly focused on interviewing successful people, but a section of his podcast is called Relationship Theory, and that's him and his wife, Lisa, which have a conversation about their relationship. And I found that would be super eye-opening for us in our relationship as well. So we were listening to that one together, and then through the podcast. Either we stop or at the end we chat about it. And that's really good for couples. So I really like that one. Peter Attia, because I'm into the longevity biohacking stuff, he has a very long form podcast called The Drive. We talk about, he's a doctor and he's go very deep into things that we should do to live longer, or the latest discoveries in the field of medicine, all of those protein and stuff. So it's a bit nerdy, but if you're interested into longevity, I think it's a good one. And lately I stumbled into Lex Fridman podcast, and that has been also really good. He has really high caliber people like Mark Zuckerberg, went there twice, Elon Musk, and again, very long form interview. And so like when I say long form, like 2 to 3 hours interview. So those are some of the ones I've been lately consuming.
Oh, I actually haven't heard of the Lex Fridman podcast. I probably live under a rock. But yeah, I'm going to check it out. I'll put links in the show notes to all of those books and podcasts as well. Hey, look, it's been awesome chatting. I've really appreciated it. I know we've probably covered this during the session, but just so there's absolutely no ambiguity, what are your top 3 bits of advice for someone pursuing financial independence?
Okay, so I think the first one will be to educate yourself about financial independence, to commit to a plan and just to adapt along the way once you are there. I think that's really important. I feel a lot of people, at least ourselves, we didn't know what financial independence was until we stumbled into it by accident. But once you understand and you came up with a plan, I think you can just get there much faster than most people. But also keep in mind that FI is much more a tool, like a mean to an end. So it's not going to fix your life. So everything that has to do with self-actualization, what you want to become, the pursuit of happiness, trying to be happy, things like service to others, like FI will just give you that armor to make it easier for you to do, but you still have to figure out what the definition to those questions are for you. And last but not least, if you pursue FI, just make sure you know why you do that before you reach there. I think a lot of people look at FI as a destination, but it's not really a destination thing. Just like I said, it's just a tool. You have to figure out what your destination is, because once you are financially independent, you just have more time for yourself. So if you don't know what to do with your time, or if you don't know what you want to do in your life, FI is not really going to answer that.
As Vicki Robbins said famously, FI is just the beginning.
Exactly. Oh, that's a good one.
She's a very inspiring woman. Look, thanks so much for coming on the show today, mate. It's been an absolute blast. I've had a great time learning about slow travel, and I think that's probably the way I'm going to look at traveling in the future, is at giving that at least 1 month or more to check out an area. And I think I'll have to check out the Nomad Purse for my next trip.
Sure, yeah. Let me know if you have feedback.
Hey, is there anything else you'd want to talk about today that we didn't bring up?
I think we covered a bunch, so I think it's pretty good.
Awesome. Where can listeners find out more about you or Nomad Numbers?
So I think the easiest way is just to go to our blog, which is nomadnumbers.com. And if you sign up for our free newsletter, then you can just reach back to you through that newsletter, I think, and you get up to date to whatever contents we are putting out there.
Awesome. I'll make sure to leave that in the show notes, put links to all of those books, podcasts, things that we've mentioned today, and of course, how you can get in touch with Nomad Numbers on their blog. Again, Mr. Nomad Numbers, thanks so much for coming, mate. Had an absolute blast, and look forward to hearing about your travel updates in the future.
Perfect. Yeah. Thank you again so much for taking the time to speak with me.
Oh, my pleasure, mate. Catch you around.
See you. Bye-bye.
Thanks for listening to another episode of the Captain FI Financial Independence Podcast. To read the transcripts or check out the show notes, head over to www.captainfi.com for all the details. If you have a question for the captain, make sure to get in touch. You might even make it on the airwaves. You can reach me online through the Captain FI contact form or get in touch through the socials. I'm active on Facebook and Instagram, as well as a number of online finance and investing forums. And finally, remember, the information presented on the show and the links provided are for general information purposes only. They should not be taken as constituting professional financial advice. You should always do your own research when making any financial decisions and make sure it's appropriate for your personal circumstance.